to this month's edition of The Live Life. This month's show is focused on the dynamics of audio. So we're going to be talking today about when it's too loud, when it's too soft, when to use compression, and what line arrays are all about. My co-host today is Mike Postuppak. Say hi, Mike.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you again. Good to be back.
And our guests today are Chuck Espinoza, Jason Spatz, and Russell Cowans. And I'd like those gentlemen to introduce themselves briefly. Let's start with Chuck.
Hi, everybody. My name's Chuck Espinoza, Mad Sound Guy on Twitter, and I'm here to talk about the decibel.
Going over to you, Jason.
Hey, Jason Spatz from CEO Productions out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here to talk about, just turn it up more.
Make it louder.
And how about you, Russell?
Russell Cowan with WorldStage. Love talking about the dynamics of audio.
All right, awesome. So recently I was at a concert festival, and I turned to my buddy, and we were having a conversation, who's Willie Nelson, no less, and I noticed that we were having a very pleasant conversation, and I wasn't shouting at him, and I looked up, and I noticed that right above me was the line array. And later on, when I was getting some lunch, I could hear the audio equally well, and it sounded to me like it was almost the same decibel level, like it wasn't much louder or softer than where I was. And it raised a question for me: what about the dynamics of audio? How is it that I heard the concert really well right there without having to shout, and I could hear it equally well back at the concession stand? Let's start with Chuck.
Well, I would say that was a really well-balanced system. With line arrays, especially nowadays with the new technologies, you get these things that are steerable. You can set up speakers that have a far throw, you can set up a mid-throw, you can set up a short throw, and so you no longer have to set up these huge monstrous things that just project in one direction to one side, and the good old-fashioned inverse square laws kind of turned on its head. I mean, with these line arrays, line systems, it's no longer 6 dB when you double. It's 3 dB when you double. You're only losing 3 dB, so you don't have to turn it up as loud to get as far. And I mean, that's the whole point of the new technology. The line arrays is I can have good sound spread out over a long distance, and I don't have to kill the guys in the first row.
So is like line arrays the savior of the sound man? Is this like throw everything else away and let's just use line arrays, or what?
I wouldn't agree with that. Over where I work, we have different sets of speakers. I mean, we have our two different sets of line arrays, one for a smaller venue, one for a larger venue. But we also have we use a lot of EV. So we also have the XN, XFs, and XBs. So if we're doing, a large field that's almost 1,000 feet deep or more, we'll use like a point source array, so we can get those XFs, which will have that long throw, and make it to the back without killing everybody up front because you're putting them up higher.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the degree, the angle of the speaker. That kind of piqued my interest. What's the difference between a 60-degree speaker, 90-degree speaker, 30-degree speaker as it relates to amplifier power and throw distance?
It's not a trick question.
I think we're all waiting for somebody to
Right.
tell us who to speak.
Good, just hop in, guys. What do you think?
So was that my favorite question on speaker angles? On speaker,
right,
speaker
angle.
degrees? Yeah. The very first thing I thought about whenever I come across how much of a splash am I going to put on the audience is what kind of easy day do I want? If I'm going to, do I get a chance to put up my front fills, or do I have a 100-degree box left and right, and there's no need for me to worry about what's going on in the center?
Well, I noticed that this summer when I did a bluegrass festival that I mixed 60 degree and 90 degree boxes. My 90 degree boxes were really warm and really rich, but they didn't have a long throw distance. But my 60 degree speakers kind of got up more over the hill. And between using both of those speakers, it seemed to really cover the distance as far as the field and the audience went. What are your thoughts on that, Jason?
With the tighter arrays, you're able to direct the sound more towards where you would like it to go versus, so you are going to lose some of your mids in there because, again, higher end frequencies do want to pass more and go farther than your mids do. So I'm pretty sure that's why you were winding up with, them not sounding as rich and warm.
Okay.
All right.
So tell me, guys. So talking about angles here. What determines what kind of spread you want on there? When do you decide? Okay, I want to put a 90 here. I want to put this here. I want to put that there. What makes you decide what to put up there?
Many things. I'll take it, guys. One of the first is what's going on right near my speaker. Do I have a wall of bodies or do I just have a wall?
Right.
And another thing that I don't mind that I'm becoming known for is, am I going to use the building as a speaker itself? I've kind of missed the old A2s, really wide apogee speakers for that. There are times I absolutely want to keep off a wall, and I don't mind going with a 70-degree box. I would think that that's one of the things that audio engineer looks at first is what's happening right near that position.
So your spread isn't necessarily going to change the dynamics of your sound so much as it's going to just where it's going to put it, basically. How much coverage you're going to get is all. It's not going to affect the dynamics of your sound at all?
I absolutely would. And there are certain contents that I've been responsible for, typically operatic pieces. Let's say if I'm doing playback, where I want to hear what I want you to hear. I don't want to hear what I want you to hear plus what the building is going to play back for me.
I follow you. Okay.
A couple of seconds behind you.
So you're saying then you want maybe a narrower spread on something so that it's not bouncing around all over the place and changing the dynamics of it.
Yes, that's correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
Russell, that's a really interesting concept, that using the building as your speaker. We do an outdoor event every Thursday in the summer on the Atlantic City Boardwalk.
Awesome.
And we're right in front of what they call Boardwalk Hall. It's a huge building, completely stone, and we're maybe 600 feet from it. So we've got our XNs out there, and we're bouncing directly off the building, and that's adding to a lot of the warmth and reverb that we get. The artists absolutely hate it because all they're getting is the bounce back. But as a sound engineer, it definitely changes your mix and makes it sound a lot better.
Right. Makes a female vocal sound great.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? Yeah. There are often times where I don't have the sub power that I want, and I know that if I can get this against the building itself, that it might help out somewhere. And not necessarily on stage. Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second. Sub-frequencies. We know that it's a very large wave. It's a very tall wave. Sub-placement and getting that overall dynamic of the sub over distance, how does that play out in how you choose the number of subs and where you place them? Let's start with you, Russell.
How do I choose a number of subs and where do I place them? That's usually how much can the client afford.
So the more subs, the better, huh?
Yeah. There's another thing that I don't mind becoming known for. I try to really dispel a little that everything that comes out of the sub is going to be omnidirectional. This is the very first thing you hear in almost every show. Oh, it doesn't matter where the sub is. We're going to hear it everywhere anyway. Well, that's not the case. You know, many things above 3 and 4 we know are directional. They're still coming out of the sub. My decision for sub placement will usually come from how in time can I keep it with my main boxes. I know that's a whole different aspect. And if I'm doing mostly a corporate show, you know, how much can I keep that interaction out of my lectern mics? What's the shape of the lobe going on behind it? Do I want to tip the subs a little in towards us and have some of that energy be redirected off stage left and right? Yeah, does that help in any way?
Yeah, it definitely does. But along those same lines, you know, if we want to keep the dynamics even over distance, what do you think about using compression, peak limiting to achieve an even dynamic? How about you, Chuck?
Well, I try not to use so much. First of all, I use a lot of powered boxes. I'm really hip on powered boxes. I don't do a lot of huge venues where I need line arrays or massive stacks, and so I don't use a lot of compression on my main outs. I try and keep everything, you know, between 0 and 10 on the level meter. I use compression on different instruments or different vocals depending on the vocalist. You know, you're always going to compress some kick drum. You're always going to compress some bass. If I have a screamer, I'm going to put some compression on them. Or, you know, if you're doing a Sunday morning worship service for a Southern Baptist, you need to compress that pastor's mic. You know, he's gonna feel the spirit, and he's just gonna get into it. And not only is he gonna get into it, he's gonna get the microphone like right up in his face with the spirit and all of the spirits before him. So I put like a 12-to-1 compression on that guy. So I want to compress the individual channels. Hopefully I can, like I said, keep that below my 10 dB headroom limit and not blow my speakers up. If I need more sound, if I'm familiar with the venue, you know, I might add or subtract speakers. If it's a new venue, I'll, you know, bring the truck and check it out when I get there. I might need to add a couple more boxes or whatnot. But usually for compression, I'll do it on the individual channel and just try and keep it there. Just kind of mix it natural.
Hey Chuck, I gotta ask. So the mad sound guy, are you just kind of like angry all the time, or are you just crazy?
No, it came out like so in the Marine Corps we were doing some stuff like you have to kind of get everybody's leftovers because the Marine Corps spends money on beans, bullets, and Band-Aids, so they don't really, you know, sound equipment. You kind of get the Air Force's leftovers and things like that. So I try to put systems together with the stuff that we pull out of the, you know, the Air Force's trash. So I ended up like the mad scientist back there in the lab trying to fix old EQs and like, you know, I had these boxes that literally had like wires sticking out of them that we had to solder back into place, and you know, the stuff got dropped off trucks, and it's all Frankenstein together. And somebody's like, "Hey, man, you're like the mad scientist." Like the
That's
mad
a great way to learn, though, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, talk about trial by fire. I have third-degree burns over most of my rear end from, you know, you're doing sound in a training zone and you run your snake and like an Amtrak rolls over your snake and splits it. You 25 minutes to solder 35 channels. You don't have a choice, you know. So you get a lot of good hard road time like that, and I end up being like a little mad sound guy, mad scientist. You know, there's a story about a buddy of mine, Christian Burrell, and I having to solder like 35 XLRs in 25 minutes.
Wow.
And
Wow.
there's no, it's not like you have a choice. You have to do it, or they beat you with a rubber hose. Oh no, just kidding. They don't beat you with a rubber hose. You know,
It's actually plastic. I know. Right.
It's pretty bad. So, okay.
While we're kind of doing a little bios here, Jason, why don't you tell us about yourself a little bit?
Well, I've been inside the industry since I was 10, learning audio. I've been a PA. I just turned 34 now, so 24 years in. I've been doing a lot of arenas, and larger venues more recently. I worked at House of Blues Atlantic City for 7 years. Was extremely sad when that closed because it honestly, out of all the venues I have ever worked, it was absolutely my favorite. The venue sounded good, it performed well, and all of the people that were there were just nice.
How about you, Russell?
I recently had a chance to actually thank Richie Fitzgerald for getting me involved in audio over at Sound Associates. A while back, they were doing a Raisin in the Sun, and they were actually this keeps it clean. They were looking for a black person. They needed a black guy on the audio team.
Wow.
Yeah, I stayed with Schaff Weisberg for about 6 years doing that, and I just returned from traveling the world and listening to as many systems as possible for about 3 years. And yeah, good to be back.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people have this image of live sound guys as a very glamorous job, but nobody seems to remember 3 o'clock in the morning loading trucks at Madison Square Garden in January. So, you know, if we're talking about the glamorous job that a sound engineer is, it mostly is not. I used to have a T-shirt that on the back of it said, "Yes, I know what all the knobs and buttons do." And
I have it.
To learn.
Yeah, there was a saying going around says that backstage was the combination where low life meets high tech, because usually we get there before everybody else. We set everything up. We're all sweaty. We have to change, and you're doing in the Marine Corps we had uniforms to put on. I know some of the going to do a gig, you got to wear all black, and so you're all sweaty, changing into clean clothes, and then you have to break down afterward, and you're done at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then you truck into the next state. If you have time for a shower, it's really nice, but you might have to get there and get set up, and the old was it like Denzel Washington in Book of Eli, like the wet nap, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm good. Right? I mean, you guys are with me, right?
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
Lived it.
On the road, we used to say that the only thing that changed was the color of the seats, the quality of the catering, and the intelligence of the locals.
Yes.
It's about accurate.
It's about accurate, but let's get back to the topic here a little bit. I wanted to ask about often in our front of house rigs, we've got an overall processor, a systems processor that controls the overall audio rig. What's going out of the console to the amplifiers, right? So when do you use the stereo imaging in that box and the peak limiting and some of the other tricks that are in there? Because I noticed that in all these places that I've traveled, the venues do sound a little differently, and I like to tune the rooms to sound the way I want it to sound, and I use some of those tricks to make it sound that way. But what do you guys do?
Well, a lot of the times it'll depend on the room. I mean, if I have a room that's like a bowling alley, there's really no stereo imaging. If I have a room that like there's a place around here used to be called TT Reynolds, where it was like a bowling alley, but you were sitting sideways, so it was really wide. So I can get the speakers real far apart and use that stereo imaging. Be honest, a lot of my systems are in mono. I mean, unless I have guys come up and say, hey, I want my drums panning from left to right, or I have stereo guitars, you're going to get a mono system. I mean, a lot of these rooms around here are the stage is 20, 30 feet wide. It's not really enough for stereo imaging. If you're doing a bigger stage or a festival, then we can get fancy on it. But for the most part, these are bars, clubs, venues, even something like the 930 Club. If you can hear stereo in this place, good on you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, stereo, that's always been my understanding that you really can't distinguish stereo in pretty much anywhere in a large venue. Is that true or not? I mean, you
I would
really
say
got to
it
be standing in the right place and be in the exact right place in order to really.
I mean, doesn't that kind of depend on whether your audience knows the content?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
That's
I
true.
mean, if you
That kind of leads to an interesting thing, like when is stereo appropriate? I mean, for electronic music, you want it to be stereo. For a rock concert, you probably want it to be mono because somebody might miss the guitar solo if it's panned right and they're standing left. For a theatrical production, if somebody shoots a bullet on stage right, you want to hear it from house left, right?
sure. Yeah.
Or
Yeah, I
house
guess
left
it
to
would.
right. Yeah.
It would be the old it depends answer. It depends on the venue. It depends on the
Yeah, and I
content.
guess upon that content, like you're talking about, if you really got something that you're going, bullet shooting across, like you said, yeah, I could see that. But your music, I would say, you're basic just listening to music. I don't know if you can really distinguish that. I don't know.
most of the times for me, what I'll do is I'll run the rig in stereo as long as the room is big enough and I've got the equipment to do it. But even for rock, but what I won't do is I won't hard pan guitars and everything hard left, hard right. I will pan them slight right, slight left, and then the drums I'll pan a little bit harder than I would the guitars. That way, as the drummer goes and rolls across his drums, you do get that effect of it moving across you.
Hmm.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
got,
I'm with you on that. I'm with you totally.
does anyone like me also do industrials and find that you get better gain before feedback when hard panning your lectern mics?
Yes.
All right. And then this is one of the small times where it definitely helps to have your system in stereo.
Yeah. A lot of times, I can never remember the brand we use, but when we do corporates and stuff, and we put up a double lectern mic, we will pan one left, one right, so you're not getting a cancellation and feedback.
Right. Same here.
Let's talk about that for a minute because oftentimes it's said amongst ourselves that a 1-2 mic gig in a big hall is sometimes the most difficult thing to mix. How about that? Do you have any experience with that, Jason?
Yeah. I mean, my company, we do a bunch of corporate, and they are, a lavalier and a handheld in a breakout room, which is a smaller room, and they want it to be loud, and they want it to be this, that, and the other thing, and I'm like, you're standing in front of the speakers. I don't know what you want from me, but, either I got to move the speakers forward, or you can't be as loud, and they usually get upset when you say that to them.
Right. And does half of that breakout room or half of that main room usually get away from the stereo imaging that you have for mains? At some point, at least for me, trying to keep a clear system and intelligible across that edge of the stage and even back to my front of house, I love to depend on smaller saucers throughout the rest of the room and even behind front of house lately. I don't mind having what I call an intelligibility fill, and that'll be straight at my head or straight at my producer's head. But even in large systems, this is the way that I personally go about making sure that my system is clear. That's by incorporating a number of other smaller systems that are mono along with my main stereos.
Yeah, I mean, using delays is in long rooms that are, just echo chambers. Delays are the most helpful thing that you could ever have.
It delays and definitely getting more smaller speakers if you can around the room. I'm a big fan of distributed audio for, if I've got one guy with a lavalier,
Same
I'd
here.
rather put a bunch of small speakers around the room in sticks and delay them than having two big speakers up front, because then, you only have to give him a few watts all over the room instead of a lot of wattage up front, and it's going to, it's simple equations off a Pagnag. Speakers closer to the ear, it's gonna make your needed acoustic gain less.
Sure, especially in like a real bouncy, you're doing a marble room or something like that. You probably would want to go ahead and do something where you have more speakers and just run your volume less, right? So it's not
Yeah.
bouncing around all over the place.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, one thing I've noticed with those really, really echoey rooms is moving the speakers closer together, so it was more of a single source. Kind of helped. It's kind of reminiscent of U2's Pop Mart tour back several years ago when they had just a central speaker cluster. Now, I didn't have a really good experience with that concert because at Death Valley Stadium in South Carolina, it seemed like I was losing a lot of it. But it seemed like a really good idea just to have a single source for a place that might be echoey and have a lot of phase cancellations. What are your thoughts on that, Russell?
A single source. Yeah, if my room was small enough, no, that's a lie. I've never done a single source. Yeah, I had a recent experience with a system that was 112 feet between positions.
Whoa.
Yeah, no single sources happening there. But I guess I guess I wouldn't have to worry too much about interactions from those other positions if I just had one. Yeah, sorry, not much I can say on that.
Right. Well, we know a lot of the theatrical venues have a center speaker cluster, and that's kind of what I was
That I usually
getting
turn
back
off.
to. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're bringing in your own PA,
That's the
definitely gonna-
feeder that's all the way down.
There have been many a theaters where I said, okay, we got left, we got center, we got right, okay, now turn that off. Oh, you didn't need it, and yeah, you're right, we didn't need it. Yeah,
And again, that's going to depend on the size of the room. I mean, if you've got,
right.
if you've got speakers on left and right that are 100 feet apart, that's a huge stage. That center speaker, that might be integral to the people sitting right in the front. But I don't know of too many theaters that have a 100-foot spread.
No, there aren't too many. This was a converted old train station. Oh, no, post office, sorry.
That's definitely an interesting venue to be in. I've never been in a room of that size, but I'd imagine either you're going to have some massive front fills, or you're going to want a center cluster.
This position was taken care of by a D&B V series, extremely wide and tipped in at about 10 degrees.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
All right. So how about those venues? How often do we get to do a site survey and we know what the room's going to be like? What gear to pick, what to have. Does it come with just experience and knowing the venue, or is there somebody going and doing a site survey for you?
I do all of my own site surveys. The company I work for, I also do sales for them, so I get to go do my own site surveys when I need to, if we've never been to a venue, and then I get to handpick my gear. I want to take this line array, or I want to take this point source array, or I want this console versus that console, or I need these mics because that's going to make the room sound just that much better.
Yeah, I'm with Jason. I think you need a site survey. At least go in the room and take some dimensions. If you can get front to back, left to right, floor to ceiling, even little things like, hey, there's going to be some really nasty standing waves in this room at 40. I want to make sure I just hit that. Or what console to bring. Sometimes it'll be a limitation of the physical console. I've got a 56-channel Verona, but it won't fit in the corner. Where you know what I'm talking about. It won't fit in the corner, or my big Meyer 18 powered stack is not going to fit through the door. Well, it's something different. But just going in there and being able to run a couple clicks in the room, maybe run some pink noise. I carry a little speaker with me, run some pink noise in the room, and I've got like an iMic I'll plug into my iPhone and an iTest mic and just get a basic reading off the room. And that'll help me pick out the the appropriate gear, the appropriate console, and am I going to need a snake? Am I going to need some Cat 5? Whatever I'm going to need for this room. And 20 minutes will save your back. Totally. 20 minutes will save your guy's back. It'll save you from lugging around stuff that you don't need.
Chuck, totally agree with you. Sorry to cut you off, Christian.
That's all right.
Totally agree with you, because there's nothing worse than getting to a gig and having the wrong gear. Either you won't fit through the door, or your console won't fit where the client wants it. I mean, my go-to console for small rooms is the SI Compact, and it is a good sounding console, and it
sounds
small.
Great.
Yeah.
We have one that I take, and that's what I take for monitors for the boardwalk. And I could take any size console because I'm outdoors, but I take that little SI Compact, and it's perfect, and it does everything you need in one small package.
Yeah. And if you're going to a room and we've all been there where we're on the road, and it's like we're getting to the sixth room of the week, and we just haven't been there. And I carried a couple different consoles in the truck. I carried something big. I carried something small. Sometimes we might not have overheads that night because we're lacking channels, but I would be able to get my board and my board case in the door. So it just depends on the venue and that site survey. If you can do it, man, it's crucial to getting the right gear at the right time in the right place, getting the sound of the place. Like you said, sometimes you might be in a marble room. Okay, I'm in a marble room. I'm going to put 2 speakers on sticks at the front of the stage, and that's all I need, because there's going to be so much energy bouncing around this room. I'm not really going to need to put a lot of pop into the room. There's going to be so much, like, critical distance is like 200 feet away. So why bring big stacks? I might need 1 sub and a couple speakers. Great.
Chuck, you said something critical there that speaks to the venues itself, and that's RTA. Why don't you tell us a little bit about an RTA and the difference between white noise and pink noise and what that's going to do for us?
Awesome. So most of the people who know me, I carry a bag with me wherever I go. I have an iPhone, I have an iPad, and I have an iTest mic, and I carry an RTA everywhere. Like, I wake up in the middle of the night, somebody's breaking into my house, the first thing I'm going to grab is my RTA. Like, seriously. So I go into some place and I want to run some pink noise. Now, pink noise is going to give me equal sound pressure throughout the spectrum. It's going to be a little bit less energy on the highs, a little bit more energy on the lows, and it's going to give me an equal pressure. This is more about how, like, humans hear sound. We don't need a lot of energy to drive those highs. They come through. That's why subs are like, we have like 2,500 watt sub amps and like a 2-watt tweeter amp, because you don't need a lot of poop to drive those highs. So I'm going to go in and run pink noise through the room. I'm going to check it out on my RTA, see what frequencies are popping up. It might be a room mode. It might be just something funky about the sound system, but I want to know. White noise is equal energy to all frequencies. And like I tell my guys, just don't even worry about that. Don't even worry about carrying a white noise with you or putting your stuff on white noise. We'll never use it. You can see how the room responds if there's a lot of glass in the room or if there's a lot of stone, marble in the room, whatever. The white noise will really make those highs pop out, but humans don't hear like that. Humans hear, you hear in an equal pressure and not an equal energy.
In octaves. You hear in octaves.
Yeah, you hear in octaves. So I'm going to run some pink noise through the room. I want to see how the room reacts. And this is with sound systems. I do a lot of installs now. I've gotten off the roll. I'm getting old, I get the white hair here. So I do a lot of installs, and I tell the guys it's all about the room. It's about how the room reacts to your system. Every room is different, so you have to make sure you tune the system to the room. Run pink noise through it. See what the room is doing. There's different spatial things that are happening in the room. Usually it's floor to ceiling is going to, you're going to get room modes from the floor to ceiling measurement. You want to be able to cut those out and get your system as true as possible. That pink noise slant all the way down your RTA. Nice, even slant down your RTA. And if you see something, you can peel it out with a good EQ. You could, if you have something sticking out or a room mode that's kind of kicking out, you can get it out with a good EQ. Most of the time, again, what I tell my young guys, if you adjust your amp to the sound pressure of the room, the needed sound pressure of the room, take your ambient noise and go, 25 to 30 dB for above ambient for a conferencing system, or, hit a target level of what you need for a band system, and you can tune your system to that level, and your speakers are tuned, and you can tune everything to a nice pink noise curve. That's like 90% of getting good sound is tuning your system to the room. And then, it's a matter of getting the guy that has a real nasally voice, EQ'd with his microphone, or if that's really how he wants to sound, that's how he wants to sound. But you tune that system to the room. If you're outside, you tune the system to the, what it sounds good at, what it can make good, a good pink curve at. If you have to pump up a lows for the outside because you're really far, cool, pump up the lows. So just getting it, getting a good tune system in whatever venue you go to. That's the big kicker for getting good sound.
So Russell, when you tune a sound system, let's say hypothetically, you tune an outdoor system at 8 o'clock in the morning. How does it sound at noon?
That's something I love pointing out to my lighting people, actually. Yeah, 8 o'clock in the morning, and noon when that haze is no longer there. What's traveling easier? What's not getting lost or blown around? Are the mids really cutting through to me? Are they getting muted? 60 feet away. Yeah.
Does the same thing go with, indoors with a room full of people? When you're tuning the system to an empty room and then, you get 1,000 people come in? I mean, does it change drastically?
I hear it best, actually, the same effect that we can hear it, outdoors on a humid day. I just had the luxury of, touring for about 3 years with a haze machine on stage, lots of haze. With a SPL coming off my stage monitors that at times were just as loud as my mains or louder. And I could start a piece off with a stage full of haze and then watch my sound completely change once that haze is burned off, and then have to make that adjustment.
Right, so it applies to inside venues as well. When the humidity and the temperature changes, you lose that medium through which sound travels best, right?
I do. Yep.
Yeah, what's that they call human sabine on a hoof? big bags of water, and at what, somebody who's 6 feet tall is going to block out stuff that's what, above like 400 hertz.
Sure.
So with that in mind, that human beings soak up a lot of that sound pressure level, how does speaker placement come into play?
Well, I think you'd want to get anything that's going to be above that 400 hertz or that 6 foot wave level above a head. I mean, I wouldn't want anything that's going to be, in my mids to be someplace that's going to get soaked up. I want that above people's heads and directly to the ears, not having to go through, Big Billy that's standing in the front row. Stuff that's, if the wave's less than 6 foot, 6'5", depending on if you're at a country show, Big Billy might not make that much of an impact. I can throw my subs on the ground, get everything up a little bit higher, and I should be good.
I don't mind sharing with you guys what my savior has been for the last few years, and that's taking a good look at the slope, the first 10 rows, 15 rows, and seeing just how much off-axis energy I could let do the job for me. So I'm talking about the energy that's coming right off the bottom of the box. How much does that person that's dead in the front need to hear? And then after that, how much can I tip back and let all the -6, -7 energy off my box safely? And we can get into SPL later because that's a biggest issue I had as a road engineer. Um, how safe can I play ground stacks right next to someone's head and the person head behind them? And the way to do that was using all the bottom energy.
Speaking of SPL, does anybody know what the EPA guidelines are for exposure to SPL over time?
Yeah, I was actually looking at that today, and it's funny. The EPA is much stricter than OSHA and NIOSH, and much stricter than OSHA and ANSI on their guidelines. The EPA has like greater than 97. They don't want you listening to anything greater than 97 dB. And below, like 97 dB, 3 minutes, 94, 6 minutes, 91, 11 minutes. They actually give you seconds. 11 minutes and 15 seconds if you're listening to 91 dB. I thought that was kind of crazy because I know, like, OSHA, they give you up to like 115. And I know it's more for like working around construction sites. You have jackhammers and, hammer drills and things like that. The EPA is really, really tight on their limitations or their max times.
I guess I've never really met a sound engineer.
What?
I said I guess I've never really met a sound engineer.
What?
Exactly.
If it's too loud, you're too old, right?
I have yet to see a rider that says, "Can I get a system that's only 95 dB?" Everything I see, I need a minimum of either 110 or 130 dB at all times.
And that's at listening position, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's 75 feet from the stage.
Yeah, that's like mid mosh pit. You want like 105 dB, so it gets people's bones rattling. So I guess most of the stuff that we do is completely like EPA out the window.
I deal with a lot of SPL police though.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That guy who found this app in this iPad and he's put it at front of house and is for his to show his boss later on the recording of how loud I happened to play that night.
I think his iPad needs to disappear.
Well, I always tell these guys, when I'm doing gigs and some spectator comes up with his iPhone or iPad or Android phone and he's like, "Hey, it's 110 dB SPL on this." I said, "When's the last time you calibrated that with a known source?" He's like,
right.
"Oh, what?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you don't have the high-speed, low-drag like iTest mic that sends a calibration file, and I guarantee you haven't sat down with a calibrated SPL meter with some pink noise and calibrated speakers, and you got this. And if you're really talking about calibration, when's the last time you put a sticker on that thing that said, I calibrated this on January 3rd of 2014, and the calibration's almost up? So you know what? Get away.
Yeah.
Go get me a beer.
What is the weighting of your iPhone?
Yeah. Really? I mean, okay, so we're at 110 dB right now. So you're at C-weighted, right? And he's going to be like, "What? See who?" Yeah.
Exactly.
Smile and nod. Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, you know what I loved about that? Years ago, I used to do some festivals, and we used to have people up all the time. You have one guy coming up, it's too loud. One guy coming up, it's too soft. So would you just go ahead, put our finger on the fader, not even move it, and the guy's like, "Oh, much better. That's good. Thanks." It's.
Do you have the fader of assurance? You always have like that one fader that you're not using. There's nothing even, like the snake isn't even plugged in, and the guy's like, "It's too loud." So you bring like the fader of assurance down, and he's like, "Oh yeah, much better, much better."
Yeah. I love doing that with artists on stage. They'll be going, "Can I get some more of this in my monitor?" "Sure." "Perfect. Thanks." I don't change a damn thing.
I mean, what's that tell you? It's I don't know. Is it all psychology or what? I don't know.
It's like that old Far
placebo.
Side cartoon where they had the shot over the shoulder of the sound guy, and he's got his finger hovering over the button that says "suck."
Yeah, the
Right.
suck knob.
Right.
Yep. So, I mean, it is kind of relative. I mean, think about it. Hearing is relative. If these guys have been, if it's a construction worker that's been hammering with a jackhammer all day long, and he's like one of his foamies popped out, and so he's just getting this jackhammer all day, and he wants to go hear Jimmy's Chicken Shack tonight, and he's like, hey man, I can barely hear these guys. What's going on? I'm going to go talk to the sound guy. And he's like, hey, can you turn these guys up? I can't hear the guitar. Or it's usually the guitarist's girlfriend. Like, I can't hear the guitar. And then you got somebody else coming who's sat in an office all day that has, like, you know, they have their foamies in and they keep them in all day long because they're sitting in their office and they're preparing for this beautiful concert experience. And they've gotten like 2 dB difference in their hearing from like nothing. And they come up and it's like it's too hot. So it's all kind of relative to what the people were listening to. Hopefully, I don't know about you guys, but I run some pre-show music. I have my pre-show mix that I do, and I try and kick it up a little bit so when the band comes on, at least they're kind of prepared for what's going on. It gives them a little bit of a relevance to what the level's going to be like. I want them to hear something kicked up, music that they know. You know, I'll play some One Direction or some stupid stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And then they hear the band and they're like, oh, that's not much of a difference. It's not too loud. It's not too soft. It's great.
Well, let's talk about something. Let's talk about listening fatigue for a second. This reminds me of many, many years ago. I was at a concert, a heavy metal concert against my will, and it was loud. It was outrageously loud. It had to be 130 dB. And yet, in the middle of the concert, I couldn't keep my eyes open. And I look behind me, and this whole theater is littered with people who have just fallen out, who've gone to sleep. Now, this was before I had any sort of education or background, and I didn't know what was happening. But I found out later that what I was hearing, what I was experiencing, was listening fatigue. Certain frequencies actually made me physically tired, and pumped up at that level, you know, the whole place was going to sleep. Jason, do you know anything about that, or Russell, do you know anything about that?
I know that there's frequencies that can put you to sleep, and that's why it's just a really weird analogy, I guess, but they put dampers in truck drivers' seats because a certain cycle of that seat moving up and down I was actually putting drivers to sleep as they would drive and causing accidents. So I personally have never experienced listening fatigue, but you know, it makes perfect sense. Russell?
Yeah, same here. I don't know anything about the science behind listening fatigue. I do know that I can only take so many hours at a certain level, and I have to be very cautious of that. I will feel myself getting tired, and also, you know, I'm responsible for 1,000 other ears besides my own, and I keep a track of, you know, am I putting them through 3 hours or 2.5 hours at 87 or 90, and you know, there are times where I would do 2 shows a day, and I would certainly be more tired than doing 1 show a day. So maybe I was experiencing that.
Well, along those same lines of listening fatigue, Mythbusters recently did an episode about the fabled brown note. Does anyone know about the mythic brown note?
I loved that episode.
I've had personal experience with a club that had a brand new sound system that hadn't been tuned out, and it was electronic music, and it was really loud, and by 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, the place was out of toilet paper.
Oh, way.
And I know the brown note exists. I know it was disproved on Mythbusters, but I don't think they did it right. I'm not sure about that. But has anybody else experienced the brown note or any other acoustical related anomalies that just made the audience act weird or do something weird?
I saw something on The Simpsons about a brown note.
A reggae show at the Bank of America Pavilion a long time ago. Nothing to do with like a reggae show.
So I know if
I don't think that had to do with audio though.
You're right.
Chuck,
I know we've talked about the upper frequencies a lot and the way they play into like beta waves and, you know, hitting the brain waves, and so one of my buddies, Brad Petrosky, used to say, I learned this in Full Sail. If you give more 7K into the mix, people will get aggressive and start fighting. And I often wanted to like just boost up a little 7K into my main mix and see if, but I didn't want to have riots in the stands, so I never tried it. But that was another myth that I heard, that 7K makes people aggressive, just the way it, the way it hits the brain.
I might agree with you. I don't know if it's 7K. I remember when my daughter, who's now 7, was randomly was little. She used to be able to scream when she was upset at such a pitch. I swear I wanted to kill myself. I don't know where this pitch was, and I don't know what the frequency was, but I'm like, oh my God, you need to stop.
I know I've actually used there's an app called Sound Grenade, and it pumps out like 17 or 18K, and it's like I can't hear it. Again, old graybeard, I can't hear that thing, but younger people can hear it. And so my apprentices, when they would start acting up, I'd play this on my iPhone, and I would put it just a tiny bit into my talkback microphone at 1:45 at night when the crowd didn't want to leave the bar. And the guys would just start feeling uncomfortable and want to leave. And it literally was like 17 or 18K. I couldn't hear the thing, but apparently it drove people nuts.
I believe that.
Absolutely.
Good way to clear out a bar.
Got to remember that one.
12 does it for me.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
Speaking along those same lines, I noticed many, many years ago I was out on the road with, of all groups, the Backstreet Boys, and it
My
was
favorite.
it was so loud in the venue, not just the PA, but the PA was competing with the screaming girls in there, that if I wasn't wearing headphones and I didn't have, sonically noise canceling headphones, all I could hear was distortion in my brain. My ears ceased to process the sound at that high level, and I just heard noise in my head. Have any of you experienced that?
Noise in the head, no.
That
Just
loud.
the voices that talk to me.
Yeah, I've heard that again back in the military, but it was more in like we're at the rifle range and everybody just wanted to pop off all the rounds they could at once. Like the artillery guys are squeezing them off, and you get just like noise in your ears.
What does the noise sound like?
I mean, your eardrums are kind of like a little microphone or speaker. It's a transducer, that at one point in time there's going to be so much vibration that the thing's just going to hit a peak, and there's going to be some white noise or almost like a square wave there. It's just distortion. You can't take 135 dB SPL. That's going to drive you insane.
Absolutely.
There is a phenomenon that some people experience as our bodies begin to go into unconsciousness when we fall asleep, of a loud banging noise within your head.
Never heard that before.
Yeah, it's out there. It's good. It's out there.
I know if you sit very quiet in a room, a lot of times, and maybe not Chuck because he's getting old with the white beard, but
Salt
you can
and pepper, I'm told. Salt and pepper.
It's distinguished. You
got a couple other distinguished things. Oh wait, sorry, George.
You start to you hear a high-pitched like noise, and from what I've been told, it's actually the sound of your blood flowing through your body. But it can be very disconcerting, like 3 o'clock in the morning when you're trying to sleep.
Wow.
Wow,
Yeah,
guys.
Look up the bang. It happens to some people. As their bodies begin to go unconscious, they hear a loud bang.
I've heard my heart beat before when I'm sitting in a room, but I've been conscious when I do it. You sit for a while and you can hear your heart. At this point in time, all I hear is everywhere I go. So
Yeah.
From the very small to the very loud. Well, it looks like we've covered a lot of topics this evening. Everything from how line arrays work to pink noise to white noise to degrees of speakers to Chuck's progression in years, and many subjects in between. And I'd like to thank all of my guests here today for joining us on the show, and my co-host Mike Postupek. If we would like to do a little sign-off here, start with Chuck to give a little exit.
Chuck Espinoza, thanks for listening. I hope everybody enjoyed it. There's some information in there, but hopefully it was funny. But good. Hashtag MadSoundGuy at MadSoundGuy@Twitter.com.
Jason.
Jason Spatz. You can find me at SoundGuy1180 on Twitter. You can tweet me and let's have some fun. Talk sound.
How about you, Russell?
Thank you, Christian. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you fine gentlemen, for real. Take my first name, put a dot in it after it, and COWANS at WorldStage.com.
Awesome. And Mike Postupek.
Hey guys, good being with you today. Thanks so much for having me. And you can check me out at Living the AV Life. That's Living the AV Life.
And once again, my name is Christian Samuelson. I was your host this week for AV Nation, the Live Life. I'd like to thank everybody for joining me today, and we're going to wrap it up for the November edition.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.